Welcome everybody to Dharma Punx Seattle. Sorry for missing you all last week. This week we're going to be talking about impermanence, specifically around the topic of relationships. So going into a little bit deeper around what is impermanence in the Buddhist context. Impermanence, I think, seems pretty straightforward, right? It's things aren't permanent. Yeah. And it is said to be in Buddhism what can get rid of ignorance. And this might also be troubling because I know if I refer to myself, I might think, well, I'm not ignorant. I'm quite smart. But as long as you have suffering in your life, according to Buddhism, you are in fact ignorant. That is how they refer to ignorance in Buddhism, is whether or not you are a person who suffers. And so taking that back a step further into, okay, what is, we've talked about many different ways that we can expel ignorance or suffering in our lives. And one of those ways is through really understanding impermanence. That much of the suffering that we experience in our lives has to do with us wrestling with the fact that impermanence is a fact, that it exists. I think that if we were to just even take a few moments to reflect on, what we're currently suffering about, how does the relationship of impermanence fit into that? Jobs really fucking sucks this week. Well, because it was really great last week. And I'm I want it to be the same. I want it to be consistent, rather than the acceptance and the impermanence of it's just going to have its ups and downs, its ebbs and flows. But when we, get to the part where it's bad, we take it as permanent, and then we start making choices. And so the idea around impermanence being, it's probably going to pass, whatever it is. And this can get tough when it comes to relationships. I think that if we were really honest about each relationship that we were to interact with, be it friendship, coworker, dating partners, we would look at them and say, hello, this is impermanent. And it goes against the status quo of what we know marriage to be, till death do us part, right? That we grow old, we get sick together, the other one dies after. And so we don't have to experience loss. And I feel like that is another big piece of impermanence, is the acceptance that grief is a part of life. Is that the things that we love, be it, just clothes that, my favorite hoodie, a friendship, that we're going to be losing things. One of the 10 recollections in Buddhism, everything will be separated from me. Beloved and pleasing will be separated from me. And so that's not meant to be a fucking downer. It sounds like a downer when you say it like that, just especially in the face of what our culture says to do, which is to amass in quantity everything that brings pleasure, right? Bigger house, bigger car, more cars, more friends, more money, and coming up against this teaching that says we're going to be separated from it all. Even if it's what we hope for, the best case scenario, we amass all the things and then we die. We still die. So the point of this reflection of impermanence is not to be a downer and to keep us from pursuing connection and pursuing things that we desire, but to just have the reality, so that way we're not so shocked when something goes away, or subverted if we're in a place where maybe we have already lost a lot. It can be hard to consider going out and pursuing a relationship connection, and recognizing that impermanence is just a part of our human experience can at least help with it not feeling so personal to our story. And so tending to the fact that I think that impermanence and grief come hand in hand, normalizing, I think, because we're not a culture that grieves very well. I think that we talk about grief in terms of death, and that's about it. People die, and then you have the funeral, and then you get over it, and you go to work, and you're still crying, and people are like, "Why aren't you over it?" And that grief takes time and can be a part of our story for a long period of time. At least in my own experience with some of the impermanence that I have experienced, like, sure, it's not always consistent, but sometimes it can live on, and it can leave that tinge and that pain. But also just being like, yeah, okay. Like this is normal and healthy to have grief for something that I loved, for something that I cared about. Like grief is just telling me that I loved and cared. That's pretty fucking cool to me. So that is the introduction of impermanence / relationships. The discussion period. I don't really have, usually I have a more thorough question. I don't really have a big question today. I feel like this can be a big topic. And so I think just talking about impermanence in whatever way feels at the edge of your comfort is what we, maybe we'll shoot for today. I think that if I were to come into the discussion, something that I might ask myself is maybe what resentments or what things are pointing me to a lack of acceptance of impermanence. That could be an interesting thing to explore. That's just my phone. It does that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and break out into groups of three. And then if you're on YouTube, go ahead and journal or meditate on the topic. We'll be back in about 8 minutes. We'll meditate for about 30 minutes. Finding a comfortable way to sit that is upright. Spine erect as a symbol of commitment and energy. Scanning through the muscles in your face, relaxing any tension in the jaw, the eyes, the tongue. Letting the shoulders drop away from the head. Softening the belly. And taking a few moments to scan through the body, seeing if there's anything else in the body that could be adjusted in order to have the ability to sustain this meditation. Getting in touch with your breath, following either from the base of the nostrils, the rise and fall of the chest or abdomen. The breath being a refuge. Relaxing into this breath, this ease, available. Opening to the realm of the senses, taste, sight, even with the eyes closed, hearing, smelling. Recognizing that all that is making contact with our senses is the four elements. Heat, air, coolness. Sound coming from earth and sound waves. Reflecting further how making contact with the elements, does it change your relationship, your feeling tone? our initial perception versus being aware of the truth of the four elements. We too, these bodies, consisting of the four elements, not so very different from the things that we like, dislike, the solidity, the earth of our bones, our skeletal nature, our teeth, our fingernails, the heat, the fire of our blood, the warmth, keeping us at roughly 98 degrees. The water element, our saliva, the gelatinous nature of our eyes, and the lungs, breathing, all on their own. These bodies that we don't have to tell to breathe. We don't have to tell the heart to pump. We often don't even tell our minds to think. So how could that be us? This body. While this body may not be us, recognizing the way that maybe we take it for granted. As a tool, as an instrument for this life. That we walk with on our path to freedom, freedom from suffering. And so taking a few moments to send some caring thoughts and messages to this body. Thank you. You're working so very hard. Thank you. I know I may not always be the best roommate. Thank you. And like all things, this body too, subject to impermanence, subject to old age, sickness, and death. And this not to be a downer, but to maybe change the relationship, the importance of presence and care now. All that is mine, beloved, and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated from me. When you're ready, allow your eyes to slowly open and attention to come back into the space. Welcome back, everybody. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on today that can make our relationship to impermanence and relationships a little bit more challenging is a more modern concept in psychology. All of you probably heard the term codependency. I don't think that should be maybe it's new. Somebody asked, yeah? Somebody asked me recently what my definition to codependency is, and I feel like because there's so many, it's such a big topic, and so I've been kind of working on what is my elevator speech on codependency. And I would consider myself a recovering codependent. And that is something that I've personally done a lot of work around. Initially, I would have characterized that as maybe people-pleasing behaviors, being a bit of a doormat, not being able to set boundaries well, all characteristics of different things that I suffered as a codependent. I think that in terms of what my actual definition of it is, would be something more to the effect of just not being able to let go at the correct time. That for whatever reason, I've put my values, my worth on the dock of somebody else. And even though maybe to everybody else around me, it might be very obvious that it's time to let go, I have this other agenda. And I don't know that if somebody would have framed it to me early on in my codependency journey, if I would have been willing to hear that. That's a hard truth. I think that I would have typically viewed myself as somebody who was confident or had high self-worth, and I don't think that can necessarily be fully true. Looking back now, hindsight being 2020, it's another way that codependency can be manifested as a tendency to fix or control others. That tendency might sound like a tendency to help, but it's not often coming actually from a place of wanting to help this person. It's coming from our own dis-ease, that we can't handle somebody else's difference. And we also aren't willing to let go simultaneously. And I think that is one of my favorite phrases that I heard in this past year, is in the title of this talk, is that difference is the boundary. And I think that so much of American culture maybe probably really plays a big role in this, is that we, despite being such a diverse country, we want sameness. We want same. Everybody same for the most part, right? And even if we say we don't, we kind of do. So this comes out in relationships, that we want sameness, how much of, some of the dating experience or, relationship seeking experience or the friendship seeking experiences, how much are we the same? How much are, oh, you like that band? I like that band too. Oh, you've been to this country? I've also been to that country, and just like looking for the things that are the same. Now, that's not to say that there aren't differences that aren't so vast that like you just can't make those things come together. But from this framework, difference is the boundary. This is just saying our difference is just the line of like, oh, that's you and that's me, and this is where we're beginning to differ. And that's not a bad thing. Often difference is seen as bad amongst friends, especially in relationships. I think difference is often seen as like you need to be like one singular unit. And so approaching any relationship, family, coworkers, with wherever the difference is, like, oh, this is where the line has to be. This is where we need to establish boundary. And being able to take that, I think that it works, in my opinion, another popular psychology is attachment theory. I like parts of attachment theory. I think that there's a lot of value, but it is often too impermanent. I have found in my own practice, and I think that the way mental health tends to pathologize our experience can be challenging, and in my own experience has caused me a lot of trouble, because if I'm just, I would typically identify as the avoidant attached, but how often is this actually just a normal reaction to some shitty behavior and not just being avoidant? And the way that sometimes attachment theory can pathologize just what's normal, even on the anxious side, like, oh, I'm being too anxious about this with my partner or with my friend. It's like, or are they just being really fucking unavailable to a fault? Can that just be normal? Not to act out and be, shitty about the way that, but I often feel like the attachment theory stuff can just be really normal and not bad. And it's how we interpret or react to it that is what's important. And for me, the way that I've learned to identify that in my own relationships is to just be able to be like, oh, that's data. This is where the difference is coming up. This is where the boundary is, right? If I start to feel that like, ooh, like, man, this person is just like not being super communicative to me. I would really desire more communication, Oh, anxiousness is coming up. I don't need to go and fix myself. This is the information I need. This is the boundary. And this is the difference. So that's where I feel like for me, attachment theory has failed, is consistently putting me in a space where I'm wrong for having feelings to sometimes very, very normal things. And, I think that, like I said, with it being impermanent, the spectrum, that we're actually all of them at any given time. Maybe if we're in my own healing journey, maybe I was avoidant maybe 75% of the pie chart, but there was also probably 25% secure, 25% anxious, and just sort of flippantly going through those. And I even still, I find myself in that cycle of, oh, okay, I'm feeling in anxious attachment land. What do I need to do? I feel secure. And so I think that what happens in that is being able to let go of sort of pathologizing our experience, and yeah. So further, taking this into more in the Buddhist, our practice. I feel like compassion for some of us can be a trap. I don't know about y'all, but in my early experience, so much of my relationship to difficult people was, oh, well, I probably just need to be more compassionate. I probably just need to be more forgiving. And there's a lot of truth in that. Absolutely. And where that becomes an issue is through not giving myself the space to feel the pain of whatever is happening, or whatever had happened, whatever rupture had happened between me and that other person. I think that in some of my own past relationships, being able to just say, oh, well, I'll just be more compassionate, was actually just me digging my heels in codependency and saying, I'm not going to let go. That's not compassion. It's because while our story, like we talk about the story all of the time, like we want to get in Buddhism, in our practice, we want to get rid of the story. But we also still have to analyze what is the truth of that story in any given moment. And if we don't recognize the truth fully, if we skip to and say, well, I'm just going to compassion my way through this, we're doomed to repeat those patterns because we weren't able to shed light on the truth of that suffering. And so being able in my own practice to not use compassion as a way to cling, but as a way to feel what was appropriate for that moment for myself. I think so often we want to have compassion for others and forget that often compassion starts with ourselves. At least in my own experience, other people might relate differently, might be able to experience compassion differently, or any of the heart practices for that matter. But they translate so much better the better I understand them directly within myself, outwardly. the better that I apply that ointment on my own experience, the easier it is for me to give to others. And that's so compassion being a really important and necessary aspect of the relationship, and appropriate compassion, not mistaking it for clinging. Another issue that often comes up in a lot of the Buddhist teachings is this. It's both. Like it sort of says both. On one hand, Buddhism says, "Be an island unto yourself," right? Like be your own little refuge. And then, almost in the same breath, in another sutta, it says there's a conversation between the Buddha and Venerable Ananda, which is very known monk during that time in a lot of the suttas. And Venerable Ananda says something like, yeah, spiritual companions, spiritual camaraderie, half of the practice. And the Buddha's like, nah, dude. The whole of the practice is spiritual companions, spiritual camaraderie, is connection, friendship. So we have these like two polar opposites. Be an island. No, it's the whole practice. And I feel like so much of Buddhism is like that, like be compassionate, but like don't be a fucking doormat. And so working with just how challenging some of this is, that it can feel so both and giving ourselves a little bit of a grace and break that like, okay, what is the middle between these two? What does it mean to be an island and spiritual companions being the whole practice? What does that mean? I could certainly launch into what I would interpret it means, but I think that I'm just going to leave you with the question to sort of sit with, to ponder, given I feel like I've talked enough. So, any questions, any just thoughts that have come up for you as that you would like to share with the group? Yeah.
When you were talking about your definition of codependency and the way that you outwardly reacted to this codependency you felt you have, sounded to me like narcissistic abuse, really. Mm-hmm. And what's between that push and pull between the individual and an island unto themselves and having compassion? If you have compassion for someone that you really care about, but they're a malignant narcissist, then they'll never stop until you're beyond the grave. Mm-hmm. Like even then, they'll just keep going. Yeah. Like how do you reconcile this thing? Like you care about them, but then you're at the same time, the only way to have peace is to not have them in your life, or at least to have a firm boundary, right? Yeah. But if that person isn't necessarily like, or you don't know, or whatever, they just need, and you want to give, and you don't see any harm in there. Like, is that, like how? I guess a lot of that is like seeing the truth, but you can't see it all, right? But how can you have enough discernment to know that you're being appropriately compassionate while preserving your own? Like how do you navigate, how do you thread that needle?
That's a really good question. And in my own experience, I feel like it definitely does vary what that could look like from person to person. I deal with, I hesitate to use the word narcissist, but somebody who's very difficult for me, pretty regularly. And I think that's one of the things that can be challenging for those of us who are on this path to wrap our heads around sometimes, is that there are people in this world who are just going to be that way. You know, like, I really love and believe in the human capacity for change. Like, that is like my fucking jam. And it's not always like universally true. That there are some people out there that are just going to be a perpetual stick in the mud to various degrees. And so recognizing those people, you know, that's something that's very common in the Buddhist suttas, is, you know, not just friends, but wise friends, right? Like, not hanging out with the fools. And that sounds kind of mean, but recognizing that I, because of this practice, live by a standard of values and ethics, and I navigate my heart based on those. And if somebody is operating not from a space of those values or ethics, then that probably means that I'm gonna have to put that distance between them in a compassionate way. Like, not like, oh, you dick, like, you're such a jerk, you know, but just like, I'm gonna take this step back and, like, compassionately have that understanding of, like, I don't know what's going on in your karma that's producing that blows. I'm gonna not be in the crosshairs of, like, the next time you decide to pick up that that gun or that rifle or that, you know, bow and arrow. Because yeah, there are some people who I do feel like are just trying to create harm. Does that answer your question?
It gives me more to think about, yeah.
Okay, it's a big question. I feel like that could be a whole talk in itself, like, in dealing with those kinds of people. Yeah.
Speaking kind of on that topic, like, does the students talk anywhere about those who already have compassion? Because that tendency, the narcissistic tendency, when we put compassion out there, there are those that feed on that.
Yeah.
And it's a very specific, common.
It is.
People who hunt codependents and harvest their energy.
Literally. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Because I know they talk about evil. Like, the word evil's in there.
Yeah.
They talk about evil.
Yeah, Mara. Concepts around codependency are pretty not very spelled out. As far as I haven't read every sutta. There's many, but it's hard for me to find very much on, like, this topic. I think the closest thing that I found was it's a Dhammapada verse, and it's something to the effect of, like, don't let others' problems be a distraction to you on the path. But yeah, nothing that I've found. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Earlier you were talking about sameness and, like, the craving for sameness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've not really thought of that before. But the way that you had described it was like, it's sort of the unfortunate, like, natural state of people is to crave that. Like, is that, I guess I'm just curious where that comes from. Is it like the psychology background, or is that part of, is it in the suttas, or?
That's more psych. That's more psych stuff.
Yeah, because it explains a lot. Hearing it, I'm like, oh yeah, that explains a lot
Yeah.
of problems. And it's a craving.
It is?
It's weird.
Yeah, it's a weird craving. Yeah, that's from one of my favorite theoretical approaches is Gestalt, which they copped a lot of stuff from Buddhism. So I feel like it's maybe an Ouroboros of.
Because it kind of made me think of these other equivalent terms and aspirations like creating wholeness or achieving wholeness or oneness,
Mm-hmm.
but they're different
Right.
in a sense. So I wonder if the sameness is rooted in just insecurity, or is it some sort of suffering around it, or inherited?
I think for me, the desire for the sameness is just control. It's really just a control thing. I mean, it's a lot easier to feel like I have control over something that I'm already a lot alike, and then extending that out to oh, I want this person to continue to be the same as me in certain ways. That's the control, but I feel more in control. Because I think often, at least in my, upbringing, I felt very, very out of control. And so being able to assert that in relationships, right? I think that's one of the big reasons why, attachment style issues or codependency comes out of addicted families, or families that have severe, generational trauma or whatever, right? So if I can create a vessel of control, the sameness, rather than accepting difference is the boundary, difference is okay.
There's a lack of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
One more follow-up question.
Okay.
Is the desire for belonging, while distinct, still somewhere in this sort of field, right? It's kind of a similar desire. Is it too kind of unhealthy? Or does that go back to being island, be your own island question?
I think it's a good question. I don't totally know. I think sometimes belonging can, is something that is just inherent biological within us, right? We are supposed to be communal creatures. To belong is survival. And, I also think that there is a sort of self-centered tendency within us to say that we're too different. We were made to feel at one point too different, that our difference was unacceptable. And so continuing to find places where our different is loved, I think would be belonging.
It's discerning where the true refuge is.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships are usually not it.
No.
Especially if you put all your energy into it. It's not wise company.
Yeah. All right. We'll close it there. So this Dharma Punx Seattle freely offered However, we do pay rent. So if you would like to help, you can throw some cash in the bowl, or you can Venmo me. $5 to $10 is the suggested donation. If you have less, give less. If you have more, give more. But again, no pressure. You don't, not necessary to be here. And we close with a dedication of merit. So if you feel comfortable, you can put your hands in Anjali. No pressure to do that either. May any goodness that was cultivated here today be spread above and below to the seen and the unseen, to those being born and to those who are dying. Oh, announcement. I won't be here next week. And then I'll be back here for a week. And then I'll be gone for 2 weeks. So there will be some folks from our community continuing to hold a peer-led group. They don't... YouTube will just be off. So those of you who do come in person, there will still be stuff happening here. So please come, please support. There will be peer-led discussion, longer meditations, good shit. So yeah. Please still come and support. Thank you.
Code.
QR code? Should just be, isn't my first and
Can I
last
find
name?
your name?